Hello, friends, and welcome. I'm your co-host, Andrew Lazaga, here with Dubside.
And you're listening to the Dubcast with Dubside.
So we're back, and summer is in full swing here in the Pacific Northwest. We had some unusually hot days at the end of May that are continuing into June, so the paddling has been very pleasant.
Yeah, on the East Coast, the summer is definitely here. Paddling is happening.
By the way, have you been getting any of the smoke from the forest fires in Canada?
Only today. I think they said yesterday and today where they were advising people not to go out, which is
Wow.
not too bad. Because the day before yesterday, I was out on my bike riding around, so I'll stay inside today. Yeah, it has been a little hazy. It's not tremendously noticeable. It's not. Yeah, it's only 10 o'clock in the morning right now. But yeah, we have been warned.
Huh. It's been a regular thing here during the summer, forest fires
Yeah.
and a lot of smoke. Yeah.
All right.
I didn't expect that you would experience that on the East Coast.
Yeah.
Well, the spring-summer 2023 issue of the MASIK, the Kayak USA newsletter, is out.
Yeah, I've been waiting for that to come out because I have an article in there that I'm fairly happy with.
Yeah.
All about it. It's like I say, it's like taking all my experiences for the past 20 years going to Kayak USA events and we're stringing them together to make a movie in my head. And these are some favorite scenes from the movie. Although when I originally wrote this article, it was twice as long as it came out to be. The editor said that's too much he wanted something less than that. So I had to take out a whole bunch of stories. But just about all these stories, I don't think I've used any of them in previous Dubcasts. So this is new bits.
It does have the flavor of the stories that you share in the podcast.
Yeah, the original version of that story was based around a paddle that I took to Greenland the first time I went in 2004. And at the final dinner, I had everybody sign the paddle. So Maligak signed the paddle, Campy signed the paddle, John Peterson signed the paddle. And then this story is sort of based on all these various characters who signed the paddle. So many of them later on came to the U.S. and I had other, additional experiences with them. And so the signatures on the paddle sort of tie the whole story together. But the way the story got finalized with the editing, they sort of de-emphasized that. So I originally had pictures of all the different signatures under each person's picture in the article, but the editor thought that looked too cluttered. So we just went down. There's a small picture of the paddle, although I would have enlarged it a bit more. And then when John Peterson signed his name, there's a little bit of extra on there, so they put that in there. But originally I had the names. So Sherry Perry being there in 2004 signed the paddle. Ari Yusufson signed the paddle. Lungwak signed the paddle. So they're all names are all there.
Wow, that's an amazing artifact to have all those signatures on that.
Yeah,
2004.
Yeah, if I put it on an auction table someday, maybe it'll get big bids.
Wow. So the article is titled "A Touch of Greenland," and that's available on the Kayak USA website. The issue of the MASIK as a free downloadable PDF.
Mm-hmm.
One last announcement. I added the new Dubcast index. I added the new updated Dubcast index. So that will be available on my website, Dashpoint Pirate. And one of our listeners suggested that we make the index available as an Excel file. So that's also will be there for download.
All right.
Every once in a while, we'll update it as we publish new episodes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, thanks again to everyone for listening. We always appreciate your feedback and your comments and your suggestions. So without further ado, here's Dubcast number 43.
Welcome to the Dubcast with Dubside. This is Dubcast number 43. Scoreboards or not. And I'll have music by a group called Rockstones. And their song is entitled Arsarnerit. Tell you more about that later.
If you're watching a football, basketball, or baseball game, to really get into the game, you have to know what the score is. And they generally make that fairly easy to determine by displaying it on the screen, or if you're at the event itself, there's a big scoreboard somewhere, so you know what the score is at any given time. And in individual sports competitions like figure skating or gymnastics or track and field events, as soon as a competitor finishes performing, their score is displayed prominently. And this all adds to the drama and excitement for the sake of the spectators. Well, as I got involved in the Greenland Kayak Championships in Greenland, starting in 2004, I noticed right away that during the rolling competition and the rope gymnastic competition, there would be a judge keeping track on a piece of paper, and the person would go through their half-an-hour routine, but there was no running total kept, and when they finished, the next competitor would take their place, and the scores weren't posted till the next day or sometimes 2 days later. And I thought that it would add a whole lot to the appeal of these events if there was a way to display the score as it was happening while they accumulated points during their half-hour routine. Well, as I've related in past Dubcasts, and if you didn't hear them, I'll fill you in right now, in 2010, the Greenlanders asked me to help with the judging, and I became a competition judge. And another observation I made over the years was that when you find yourself wanting to say you folks should do something, as a foreigner telling them what they should do, you have to really be cautious about that. And it's better to just stay quiet and learn something, rather than give out unsolicited advice on things you probably don't fully understand anyway. And I had an example of a foreigner seeing debris and trash and things in some of the neighborhoods on the streets and suggesting, they should clean up the neighborhood better, without really understanding how things work, as well as the fact that it's half the year it's covered with snow and you can't even see that stuff anyway. And I determined that if you want to get something accomplished, if you're trying to suggest a new innovation, you're far better off doing all the work yourself rather than just say, hey, you should do this. So rather than telling someone you should clean up your yard, you'd say, would you mind if I swept up this trash and hauled away this debris? It's a far better chance of making a change in the way things are done if one volunteers to do all the work themselves. Therefore, if I wanted to see a running total of the points during the ropes and rolling, I would have to come up with a way to accomplish that. Easier said than done. Well, based on my experience as a competition judge, I knew that the score is noted on the score sheet for each individual move, but no running total is kept. It's only later that somebody goes back and takes each score sheet and adds up all the numbers to come up with the final score. So the first order of business for me was to come up with a way to calculate the total on an ongoing basis while the person was competing. And I did that with a spreadsheet program. It's fairly straightforward to plug in all the score sheet numbers and just have a column that automatically totals at the bottom. And I figured out how to plug a second monitor screen into a laptop, and then you have the score sheet on the laptop, and the second screen displays just that running total in full-size font. And once you got that far, you can add some flashy stuff in there. When they hit the 30-point minimum qualifying score, the screen goes, green or something. And if they do 100 points, it flashes red or some other color, just to add some bling. Well, this was during around 2011, and Kayak Academy in the Seattle area was putting on a Greenland competition week. And we had an abbreviated weekend race, roll, harpoon throw, ropes kind of thing. And I was able to try out this spreadsheet scoring system. And I found out that when the person competing knows how close they are to some mark like 100 points, and when the audience knows that too, then everybody gets excited, and that really adds to the event. But there were two important things I learned from this first experiment. And one is that standard video monitors, when you take them outdoors in sunlight, they're more or less useless after about 5 or 10 feet away. The other thing was that the ideal position to put the score display is right behind the competitor, so everybody looking at the competitor can see what the score is. If you have to turn your head to the side, it makes it more difficult, and you're often not going to bother to see the score that often. So for rolling, I would need some sort of scoreboard that was waterproof, that would run on batteries, that have wireless remote control, and be bright enough in sunlight. That's a pretty tall order. I was on a quest, and I was driven to make this work, one way or the other. Found a company in the U.S. that makes those displays you see in a bank or a post office, take a number. And these are LED displays about 8 or 9 inches tall. You can get them 2-digit ones that go up to 99, or you can get 3-digit ones that go up to $9.99. And I would need 3-digit ones because ropes and rolling scores can be over 100 points. And they also made a clock with 4 digits with seconds and minutes. And in the final minute, it would dramatically switch over to seconds and hundredths of a second as it counted down to 0. And they had options. For another $100 or so, you could get the brightness feature. So when it sensed it was in sunlight, the LEDs would brighten. And there was also a wireless option, another $100, give you a transmitter, little key fob, and a receiver unit with an antenna that would fit onto the back of the display. The scoreboard with the options cost about $500 or so, $500 or $600. The clock came to about $800. And I eventually got 2 scoreboards and 1 clock, spending a lot more money than I'd originally planned to, but I was on a roll. Then I had to modify them to work with some drill batteries. They needed 18 to 24 volts. I also got some extra large clear dry bags. I could put them in with the wireless unit and the battery and make them kind of waterproof, splash proof at least. 2012, I had them ready to take to the Greenland competition, and by then I was no longer bringing a folding kayak to Greenland, so I had space in my baggage. And Maligak was there that year. It was held in Pamiut. It would have been really nice if they had said at the beginning of the competition, Dubside has this new scoring system, and this is an experiment, or we're going to try this, and there may be some glitches here and there, some delays, but we'll see how it works. Well, they didn't do that. They ran things the same as they always did. No special considerations for me, and I was left to stumble along and try to keep up on my own. For the rolling competition, I only had it up and working for maybe half of the competitors, but I did get to use a piece of a floating fishing pier that I could put the scoreboards on, and the people rolling were in front of that, so the sight lines worked quite well. For the ropes, it was even better. I had it up and running for some of the top competitors, and if you took a picture with the scoreboard in the background, it would document exactly at that moment when the picture was taken how much time they had left and what their points were. And when they finished, they could stand in front of their lit-up displayed point total to document their competition score. Well, it was hard to know exactly what the Greenlanders felt about this new innovation I was presenting. Malikak was giving me the thumbs up, so I felt I'd be welcome to bring it again the next year. And in that time, I planned to make some improvements. There was a problem of pushing the button fast enough to keep up with the competitor. Some of the higher valued moves are worth 7, 8, or 9 points. And if they hit left side and right side, you're trying to push the button 18 times, and it's wearing my finger out. So I wanted to make a keypad that would have, 0 to 9, and I would just push a 9 and it would register 9 pulses to the scoreboard. Well, back where I was living in the U.S. at the time, there was a group of local paddlers, and during the summer months I'd be gone traveling, but during the fall and spring when I was still around, they would paddle and I'd go paddling with them. And I got in with this whole gang of folks. And there was a couple there named Mark and Rose DiBernardo. And they were some pretty cool folks. And Mark would call me up when him and his wife were going to go paddling, see if I wanted to go. And I'd usually say yes. And he'd swing by my place, and I'd put my folding kayak in the back of his car, and their 2 kayaks would be on the roof, and we'd go paddling. When talking to Mark, I would mention this scoreboard project I had, and I was trying to make a keypad. And he told me he could design a box that would have all the scores internally kept, and you would just register each move, and it knew what the score was. And I said, no, I want to keep it simple. Just a straight keypad, 0 to 9. You get too complicated, it's going to have reliability problems. I don't want to go into that. Well, Mark just wouldn't hear that. He said, no, we can do this. And he took the idea and ran with it. That introduced me to the world of Arduino. Arduino is the name of a programmable microprocessor that you can get in kit form, and then you can build burglar alarms or flashing light kind of things, but that's just kid stuff. These things have the capability far more advanced than that. You can control drones or robots, interface with GPS or RFID, or there's tremendous possibilities. But in order to run these, you have to write a computer program in the special Arduino language to make it do what you want. Well, Mark wrote the initial program, which got me started. I was able to make adjustments to it afterwards, but I never would have been able to write the initial one. And we had a little box about 6 inches long, 3 inches wide, that internally knew all the scores for all the moves for both the ropes and the rolling, and had a little display on it. It would read out the abbreviated name of the maneuver and show you the points, and you just push the buttons on it and it would register the point was made, or you could take a point off in rolling if it wasn't quite done as well. And it would send out the pulses either wirelessly or through a cable to the scoreboard displays. I took the new improved version of my system to Greenland the next year. It worked that much better. It was not seen as a replacement for their system. They still use the pen and paper and their stopwatches for the official time. I had had this idea that I thought would really improve things, to have 2 evenly matched competitors competing on the same clock with 2 different scoreboards. And then the drama at the very end as they squared off against each other, and you could see exactly who was ahead and who was behind. But that didn't fit in with how they normally did things. They had a certain order that people in one age group division are supposed to follow, and to put 2 people together at the same time was too much of a departure from how they normally did things, so that wasn't going to fly. They also had this procedure where the competition time would stop when they were, say, tying on the float for the avatak roll or for the ropes when they had put on the weighted backpack, and they would start again when the person was ready to go. So if you have two people competing at the same time, if they're not going to stop together to put on these things, or they could be totally different parts on the list, it just throws the whole thing out of whack to try to put them on the same clock. But maybe the biggest problem I had was that my box took a bit of training to know how to use. There were certain things you had to hold buttons down to switch it back, and certain situations where you had to know how to make it work the way it was supposed to. And there just wasn't enough time during the competition to train somebody, to give them enough time to get familiar with using it. It would just be so hectic and rushed that somebody just sit down and have to start judging, and they didn't have time to really play with some funny box they didn't understand. And of course, if they didn't speak English, then I couldn't really tell them how it worked. Since I was carrying these around with me, traveling, I was able to use them in Norway at an event there that they started doing a rolling competition. And there were 2 years I used it there's a Danish Kayak Federation has a competition event, which has a Greenland rolling component. And I used the scoreboards during that. And back in the U.S., I was still making improvements, and Mark was helping me on that. I switched to 24-volt lithium-ion batteries, which would last a lot longer between charges. And there is a maneuver done where you have to time for 10 seconds how many rolls a person can do. Speed rolling, it's called. And normally in Greenland, the judge would have a second stopwatch just to time the 10 seconds. Well, I was able to build into the program a timer that would beep at the end of 10 seconds, so you didn't even have to look at the clock. You could just hear it, and it would let you know. And it wouldn't even let you add points in that maneuver after that. It would just stop registering points after 10 seconds. So it was a very convenient built-in method to accomplish scoring on that maneuver. By 2014, they were sort of used to me bringing this thing, and it wasn't the official score because they still use a pencil and paper, but it was more and more accepted. And that year, a guy showed up from Arsarnerit, farther north, and his name was Arsarnerit. And Arsarnerit was there not to compete. He specifically got involved to help with the judging. And so I sat with him at the judging table, and we worked together. And his great advantage was that he could speak English. And Arsarnerit, he was kind of a quiet guy, but he quick with a smile. And so the judging had started to work out where there'd be a judge making the decisions, a guy next to him with the pencil and paper, and then me next to them running the scoreboard. And so Arsarnerit would be the secretary with the paper. And in 2014, at the end of the ropes competition, they usually have the foreigners go last. So he had seen me work in the box for several hours, and then I went last competing, and he had seen me working the box enough that he was able to work it while I competed, and then I could see my own points going up as I competed, which was a big thrill for me. 2013, Mark made a third control box for me, and he was printing out the cases for these on a 3D printer. So it's custom fitted enclosure for the Arduino electronics inside. 2015, I came with my scoreboards again, and I thought about buying a second clock, but it just cost too much, so stuck with the one clock and two scoreboards. And I was glad to see Arsarnerit again, and he got even further integrated into the process. I could set him up with his own scoreboard and control box, and he'd work that at a separate station, and I'd have my own station with my own scoreboard and control box. And we had two independent stations going at the same time. Well, only one of them had a clock, but he was familiar with it enough to use the whole thing all by himself. Now with him, I felt I was really getting somewhere. I had a Greenlander on board with this process. I was building up a team. I had Mark in the U.S. helping me with the electronics, and I had Arsarnerit in Greenland, using it independently from me, and things were looking good. And before I left Greenland, I took the third control box and lent it to Arsarnerit. And I said, here, take this, hold this for a year. You can practice with it, get even more familiar with it, and I'll see you next year. Well, on the little Arduino box, it was a 2-line display. And I had to abbreviate the name of the maneuver and had enough space for the points underneath that. And talking to Mark, we considered if we had a bigger screen, we could put more on the graphics. And he said you could even possibly get a touch screen, maybe even color with a little picture of the maneuver on it. But in order to do that, you'd have to go to a different system. Arduino didn't easily have that kind of stuff, the attachments for the kits and things. There was a whole nother version, different brand. It's called Raspberry Pi, Pi. And the Raspberry Pi processor had even more inputs and outputs and more flexibility. And they made a touch screen that you could hook onto that. So if we wanted to use that, we'd have to write a whole nother program because the Raspberry Pi has a different programming language. And that was way beyond me. But if Mark were to start me off on an initial version of the program, I could take it from there. Well, at this point, my Scoreboard project had gotten off the ground to a very good start and had all the potential to take it much further. And then the story takes a different twist. And in Greenland, you never know what the future holds. The way things turn out can be so far removed from your expectations. Well, in the fall of 2015, I wasn't getting any calls from Mark to go paddling. And in early 2016, he told me why. He had been diagnosed with cancer, a rather advanced form of cancer, and things did not look good. And in the late spring of 2016, I lost a very good kayaking friend. And let me make a public service announcement here. If you have been putting off getting any of the standard recommended cancer screening procedures, please don't put it off any longer. Well, despite that major setback, I went to Greenland that summer anyway and took my Scoreboard system. And it was in Nuuk, the big town. And I flew in and at the airport got picked up by Jacob Peter Enoksen, the president of Kanakatufiat. And since I don't do email or the internet, I had to ask him, what's the latest, what's going on, what's happening this year. And I asked about people that, who was coming. I said, is Maligak coming? He said, no, Maligak's not coming this year. Other people, Karen Murray Jensen or Ari Christian Yusufson or people like that. And then I said, is Arsarnerit's coming? And he goes, oh no, over the winter, Arsarnerit hung himself. And I said, excuse me? He said, he hung himself. And I spent the rest of that afternoon in a daze. Just thinking, you have got to be kidding me. Arsarnerit? Now, I've been to Greenland enough years to know that there are social problems, there are drug abuse issues and child abuse issues, etc. And I knew that suicide was a problem in Greenland. But knowing that didn't make it any less painful when it struck so close to home. I never would have guessed that of the 3-person team I'd put together for my Scoreboard system, a year later, I'd be the only one left alive. The next year, I think I just took one scoreboard in the clock And the following year, I didn't take any of my scoreboards to Greenland. And the next time I go, I may not take them at all. They can get along just fine with a pen and paper, as they've been doing since the beginning. And in thinking about it, I'm wondering if my original idea was misplaced. I was looking at the competition like it's something we have to build up, we have to make it bigger. If it's the Olympics, we just want to go up and up and up. And maybe that wasn't their thinking at all. They're just having a nice celebration of their culture. It doesn't have to be huge, doesn't have to grow every year. If it does, that's okay. If it doesn't, that's fine too. I can think of one time when my assistance was solicited and delivered and worked out quite well. And this was in Ilulissat one year with John Peterson, the president of the Ilulissat Club. They're setting up for the competition, and in their club, he had a PA system, rather battered, worn out set of speakers. And he knew that I had sound engineering experience. And he just said, Dubside, hook this up for us. So I looked at it and figured out what plugged in where. And they wanted to play music through it, like they do it every year, if they can figure out a way to do it, if they have the right system. And so to plug somebody's phone into the PA system, I'm looking at it, and there's not the right adapter cable. They just don't have it. So I rummaged around in the club, and I found some other wires that had some of the right ends on them. And I found a solder iron somewhere, and I found a place to plug the solder iron in, and I managed to rig up something that would make it possible to run a cell phone into the PA system. And if I hadn't been there, they would have done something else. They might have just had the megaphone with the batteries and no sound through there. But I was there. I was an unavailable resource. And John Peterson noticed, here's a resource, here's a problem, let's connect them up and make it work. And they asked for me to help out with that, and I did. And it worked out quite well. And if I go to Greenland again and they have on their own some means of displaying the rolling and rope scores while someone competes, then I'll know that my idea had some merit and somebody wanted to take it further. If I don't see anything like that, I'll know that my idea was, maybe they thought it was cool, but it wasn't worth spending thousands of dollars on and all that time and effort. They can get by without it. Does anybody want to buy some used scoreboards? Here's a Greenlandic band called Rockstones. They have a song called Arsarnerit, and that means the Northern Lights. So here is my version of Rockstones' Arsarnerit.
Sinna taşdugami isigigit takuakimi na yoritit soşlu sekinek eve açdutit nak asanerit tapavaunami put he sokela suhit Amana isi tuku atona git ila takuk besatit işli Nayoshduta kisimiasimi Egalutishdu kama nisinatumi Kama putilinu pekanihi Asanerit Amanerit nunami ashduni Nayoshdu gudu hinu muhut sashluni Kama putilinu pekanihi Asanerit Islalashdu timi isigivatsit Yakuni nepitu sanagu Tigusavatsit Sekinek Isinitilumnut Timinitsaninut Elinitsavungasuak Tusamat nipi Kamana Isituku Atonagit Ila telkuk Isatit Ishli Nayoshduta kisimiasimi Begalutishdu kama nisinatumi Kama putilinu pekanihi Asanerit Kama nerit nunami ashduni Nayoshdu gudu ilumuhut sashduni Kama putilinu pekanihi Asanerit
Okay, that is a song called Arsarnerit, originally done by a band called Rockstones. And if you've been listening to my Dubcast for any length of time, you know that I say you can buy the CD of that song by going to atlanticmusic.gl and purchasing it. However, this one, you can do that, but this one is also available. I believe you can download it online somewhere, for paying whatever they want on, I don't know, maybe Apple Music or one of those things. But I'm told there is also on YouTube somewhere that actual song done by that actual band. If you type in Rockstones Arsarnerit, Arsarnerit, and you will get, it's not the most exemplary version of their work, but it's somebody, looks like they were playing some bar in probably Greenland somewhere, and somebody recorded them playing that song on their cell phone. So the sound isn't very good, and you can hear the drunken fans singing along, but you can actually see that band performing that song. And if you're inspired, then you can buy the actual, or download the real studio version of that song done by them, which is a whole lot better. The song comes from their debut album 2015, entitled Qilammi ungasissumi. And it doesn't have the translations in English, but I'm going to say that title of the album is something like the sky, faraway sky, in the faraway sky. That is where the northern lights would be. Next time in episode 44, the topic will be myths and stereotypes on the Dubcast with Dubside.